Do you remember Multiversus? This is the story of its rise, downfall, and potential comeback. Multiversus is a platform fighter similar to games like Smash Bros. And Brawlhalla, starring characters under the Warner Bros. Umbrella of franchises. One of the big differences that sets Multiversus apart from all the other fighting games is that instead of focusing on 1v1s like most other fighting games do, they instead devoted the game to 2v2 gameplay, which I'll get into later. The game quickly started to gain traction after the announcement in November of 2021, with players excited to play as characters like Arya Stark, Bugs Bunny, and Super Saiyan Shaggy for some reason. But even before the official announcement, players had long been speculating over some leaks made about a Warner Bros. Platform fighter, so hype was already building before the release, or even announcement. In May of 2022, the game released into a closed alpha state to test out the servers and players' reception to the game in general. And things would only go up after the game launched into full release 2 months after. This is where the game really starts taking off, hitting one of the highest concurrent player numbers in any fighting game ever on Steam, at least from what I know. Enjoying its floaty and combo-heavy gameplay with interesting and unique characters, as well as a very unique system which was called perks, which let you pick one main perk which was unique to each character, along with 3 standard perks that everyone could access. I honestly really liked this system, as it brought a lot of ways to counter strategies with perks, depending on a matchup or something like that. And on top of all that, it's just the game looked fun. It has a great art style that I think drew a lot of people in. Another big reason for the game blowing up was also large part due to Warner Bros. Sponsoring a bunch of content creators like AlphaRad, Germa, and people like Macro, which is actually who introduced me to the game, along with a whole bunch of streamers, obviously. So with numbers rising and updates on the horizon promising new characters and content, I really can't understate just how much people were really expecting Multiversus to be a mainstay in fighting games. The game had on its initial announcement revealed that it would also be present at EVO 2022, with a prize pool of $100,000. This event really did bring quite a lot of press, and it also gave a lot of hope to people who were looking forward to this game being an esport. But of course, this is Multiversus, so there was some issues with the tournament. Other than the technical difficulties of multiple people playing on keyboard, there was one issue that I don't really hear people talk about that much. It was the meta at the time, which basically just consisted of all the projectile sonar characters spamming all of their projectiles, which to most people who weren't already playing the game, if they saw that, they probably just thought that Multiversus was some projectile spamming spam fest, really, which at the time, it kind of was. Don't get me wrong, having zoners in a game is fine. Games should have zoners, but having the game's big showing in a competitive environment just being a projectile spam fest is really just a bad look for a game trying to be serious and competitive about fighting and not just projectile mash, right? But even so, this was a great event for the existing community, generating many memes.
What did you think about that?
I'm not surprised.
Touch the ground in every way. Upper finds it, and that's gonna be it. Void and the Cat are your EVO 2022 Multiversus champions.
I'm not surprised.
Sparking discussions of the game as an esport that I think were good to have. But just as quickly as it took off, people started to realize that the game had a lot of issues. The most glaring and frustrating one being the horrible netcode. It's not that it just never worked, but it was extremely inconsistent, and no matter how good your internet is, you will constantly find matches with only 2 bars, which basically made the entire match lose all competitive integrity. And on top of a sloppy online experience, players also had to deal with terrible hitboxes that felt super inaccurate, and the netcode and hitboxes compounding on each other just made everything feel worse. Eventually, the hitboxes would be improved and fixed, to a certain extent at least, but by that point the game already had the reputation of a game not worth taking serious. Not only that, but players were also frustrated with how long it took to unlock new characters, at least for free. Multiversus tried to fix this kind of issue with a system that on paper sounds great, but in practice it really doesn't fix anything. So what it was every week, 4 new characters would be free to try out. Sounds great, right? The only issue was that characters like Shaggy, tutorial character that a lot of people really wanted to try out, as this is the character you play in the tutorial obviously. If he isn't in the free rotation, people wouldn't be able to play him without having to unlock him first, which can take hours. So what would happen is people would download the game, play the tutorial, fall in love with Shaggy, and want to play him. And then they find out that they need to play for maybe multiple hours to actually unlock him. If you're curious how long it would take to unlock characters, my friend actually tried doing this, and it took them 91 hours. And keep in mind, he was doing everything, trying specifically to do it as fast as possible, doing everything you can to earn as much gold. And it almost took him 100 hours. Dividing that into the 23 characters currently available in the game as of writing calculates to almost 4 hours per character. Let me just say, if someone doesn't enjoy the character they're playing, they won't be playing for 4 hours, that's for sure. And I honestly think there's two very easy fixes for this problem, which first one is just to let people pick one character of their choosing for free. And then also letting people try out characters with a system like what Pokemon Unite has. There are rental cards that let you play a character, or in the case of Unite, Pokemon, for a limited amount of time to let players figure out if they enjoy the character. You can play Pokemon or characters in the respective training modes of the game, but you really can't get a grasp of how the character properly works in a real game in the training mode. But at the end of the day, all of the issues of the game, the devs were obviously working very hard to try to address all the player needs and feedback, adding new characters and content shockingly fast. I really do gotta commend Player First Games, as it really seemed like they were listening and addressing the community's feedback as much as possible. Almost to a fault though, I'd even say, as it seemed like every time a group of players complained enough about anything, it would get changed the next patch. But at the same time, extremely unfun things and unfair 0 to death combos would stay in the game for way too long at a time. While I can understand that it's hard to balance a game, I really think the focuses were just on the wrong things. But still, the game was staying alive for a few months with new characters like Iron Giant, LeBron James, and just a quick side note, it's still insane to me every time I think about it that we got fucking LeBron James in Multiversus, which is so funny to me. But anyways, they also added both Rick and Morty, along with many other characters. But even when it comes to this, I really don't think the characters they decided to add help that much. New characters can bring a lot of life and press and a lot of, content to the game. With characters like LeBron James and Rick and Morty, I feel like they actually have fans that might bring into the game. But then they also add characters like Gizmo from the Gremlins. Now don't get me wrong, I really like Gremlins, the movie, and Gizmo, but it really doesn't make sense to add a character from a franchise that most people probably don't even know what is. But not only did they add Gizmo, they also added one more character from the fucking franchise. They added Stripe. I don't understand why they added 2 characters from a franchise that hasn't done anything in over a decade. And all around, there's just so many questionable decisions being made with the game, and I really started to feel that the player base at this point was getting very worried about the future of the game. Over the next couple of months, the game proceeded to lose over 90% of its player base in an extremely short time span, going from a peak of 150,000 concurrent players, but within just a few months, the game was down to an average of 3,000 players on Steam, with players citing earlier mentioned netcode, as well as players feeling like overpowered characters not being nerfed quickly enough. And on top of this, a large part of the player base felt neglected due to Player First Games, the developers, prioritizing balance in 2v2s over 1v1s. Now obviously, the focus of the game is on 2v2s, but 1v1s really felt just neglected, and a lot of people barely even played 2v2s, so a lot of people just felt, shafted, to be honest. There's an issue with that. Some characters, like Batman, for example, being extremely powerful in 1v1s, not really being that useful in 2s, brought some issues where Batman was kind of terrorizing 1s while being underused in 2s. Or something like Arya, whose combos take a long time, so that in 2s, if you get caught in an Arya combo, your teammate can come over and help you. But in 1s, you obviously don't have a teammate, so you just need to sit in a combo which is designed to take a long time on purpose, without a lot of options other than just learning to DI the right way, which is never fun. And all of these issues compounding along with content creators leaving the space, by the end of 2023, the game was down to just 1,500 average players on Steam. And by this point, there really isn't that much to talk about. For almost 6 months, nothing noteworthy really happened or was added, and the player numbers were just slowly dwindling. Until out of nowhere, they announced that they would be closing the game temporarily in June, with the promise of more content and fixes to all the bugs and stuff with the eventual full release of the game. Oh yeah, do you remember when I said it released fully earlier? Well, I was lying. The game actually technically only released into open beta. So all of that time and even money people put into the game was just for a beta? People got quite upset with this announcement, calling Multiversus just a cash grab, and since players had already spent money on the game, for them to just take it away, people were really mad. I definitely understand why people feel this way. I also spent money on the game, and it's kind of frustrating. But to be honest, I think this is the only way Multiversus can make a comeback. To me, it seems like there was a deadline they were trying to hit somewhere, which made them release the game too early before it really had all the polish it needed. So yeah, the game closed down on June 25th, and from there on, there was radio silence for months, until in March of 2023, they announced the release date for the game, May 28th, promising to share details within the coming weeks, and at the time of writing, we've so far seen that the game has been rebuilt from the ground up with a new engine.
We moved to Unreal Engine 5, which will improve the game's visuals and character lighting. So in other words, Shaggy sandwiches have never looked better.
And the reason for that being the new netcode. I really hope that we won't have the same netcode issues as before, so I'm very excited for this. But if that were all they were changing, it wouldn't really matter that much. However, we've also now seen how the game looks and feels, with the big changes that the game looks slower, hits stop being longer, characters being bigger, which doesn't sound that good, but I honestly think this is for the better. Saying that something is being slowed down has a bad connotation, I feel like, but I think it's for the better. But when it comes to new things being added, we've seen two things so far. One of them being dash attacks, which give every character one new move that likely works how dash attacks works in other games like Smash Bros. The second thing we've seen is a whole new defensive mechanic called parry, which is performed by dodging a move with what used to be neutral dodge. Hitting this parry lets you punish your opponent with a combo or a kill move, but if you neutral dodge and you don't actually hit it, you get an extended period of lag where you can be punished. I'm personally very excited for both of these, but the parry really gets me curious and hyped for the options you can now have. And hopefully it makes the game a little more defensive, which is something players have long been complaining about. I'm personally very excited for the future of Multiversus, as it really is a special game to me. It was one of my first fighting games. Now, we can discuss if platform fighters are even a part of the fighting game community in another video, but anyways, the game led me to play a bunch of other fighting games, which is now something I do all the time. The game also led me to a great tight-knit community in Discord servers to discuss the game, and through that I actually ended up making some really good friends that I still talk to all the time. If this video made you want to play the game, it's actually still possible to play it through Steam Remote Play or Parsec. If you don't know how to set that up, there's a video in the description for you to see how that works. And yeah, that's basically it. That's the story. I hope you're excited for the launch just like me, and thanks for watching the video. If you made it this far, please also like and subscribe. It helps out a small channel, like a little baby channel like me, a lot. So yeah, thanks. Bye.